clicked on this video, then you might be thinking that you never have enough mental space to focus on what actually matters because you are constantly trying to remember random tasks and deadlines. Your brain feels like a cluttered desktop where important files disappear behind a mess of random downloads, and even when you do write stuff down, you end up with reminders scattered across sticky notes, random notebook pages, and phone apps that you either forget to check or accidentally swipe away reminders for when you're on your way to Instagram. For years, I thought I was just bad at remembering things. But what I actually needed was a better system for getting things out of my head completely. I tried future logs, digital reminders, daily task lists. Everything felt either too broad or too overwhelming. That's when I developed what I call the drop and find weekly system. In this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how this simple weekly reminder method transformed my work life, eliminated task loss, and gave me back the mental clarity to actually focus on what matters. The drop and find system is essentially a reminder system where you take a weekly planner and you drop, or you write, tasks under the day you would like to be reminded that you need to complete that task. And then on that day, you come into your planner and find your tasks waiting for you already. So when your boss mentions something for next week, for example, or when you're planning to follow up on a certain email thread a couple of weeks down the line, or when a particular project deadline pops into your head, you can immediately flip to the week of your choice and drop that reminder in on the specific day that you want to be reminded of it. This is not always the same as the day you want to do the task. It is usually just the day you want to be prompted to either do the task or start integrating doing the task into whatever weekly plan, monthly plan, or daily plan that you already have in motion. Now, there are lots of reminder systems that use what I call the drop and find method. For example, the bullet journal concept of future logs is a type of drop and find system. Let me see if I have an example. This is an example of what a potential future log from the bullet journal system could look like, with the drop zones being months instead of days on a weekly calendar. Or if you've ever heard of having a physical tickler file, that is also a version of this system, a tickler file being where you have a big file box, like one of those ones you find in the office that are huge, and you have a file folder labeled for each day of the coming month. That is an example of a drop and find system. You drop the tasks into the dated folder, and then when it gets to that day, you open the folder and you find them again. A simple reminders app on your phone is also a version of this system, ones where you can just drop your reminders in and then find them on the correct day to keep your life moving smoothly. But the key difference between those other systems and my system is granularity and memory retention. So because future logs are traditionally monthly, I find that they are way too broad to handle daily chaos, especially in a really, really busy life. Meanwhile, having a daily task list can become overwhelming because then you're cramming everything into one day instead of spreading it out strategically. A weekly format, meanwhile, offers you granularity without the chaos. You can see what's coming up at a glance, just like with a traditional future log, but you can also plan things out day by day and get super strategic. This is just one example of a weekly log that you could use for this type of project. It is a vertical weekly. I pretty much ignore the times over here on the sidebar that denote like the hour of the day, and I just write in tasks wherever. But you could also use a weekly such as in the Hobonichi Weeks, a horizontal weekly with a memo page over here. You could even use a more traditional horizontal weekly. This is a pocket version from Sterling Ink, but it has the horizontal weekly here with a little bit of space left over to write. Literally any weekly planner works, big or small, horizontal, vertical, whatever. The important part is just that you have something that has the week at a glance on a spread, and then the individual days blocked out. You could even draw your own in a blank notebook. It literally doesn't matter. But why paper instead of digital reminder apps? I mean, doesn't the reminders app on your phone like literally exist for this reason? Yes, I will say digital reminders or task management systems totally fall into this category of drop and find systems, but I would advise you to have an on-paper system instead because of a few reasons. First, digital reminders are too easy to dismiss with just a swipe. I'm always setting myself reminders and then dismissing it and completely forgetting that I set it in the first place, and then my tasks just don't get done. Second, a digital app is always going to come with more distractions than a paper tool
specifically because with paper, there's no chance of you clicking over to Instagram or YouTube and getting distracted for hours before you actually complete the thing you reminded yourself to do. And third, you guys know I'm an absolute preacher of this. The cognitive benefits of handwriting are actually so powerful. When you write something down by hand, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. You're activating all those regions that are associated with motor function, memory, learning, all at the same time. This just doesn't happen with typing. So you can see why handwriting would be important for a system that helps you remember things. The handwriting is actually key here. That's why this on-paper weekly drop and find system really hits the sweet spot. It's much more detailed than a future log, more active than digital reminders, and less overwhelming than daily micromanagement. Now, I do still use daily task lists. You just saw an example of one back here. Of course, I didn't bookmark the page. There we go. You just saw an example of one back here, and most of my daily pages are filled with that type of work. But those daily spreads always start with me coming into my weekly drop and find to find the things that I dropped in here before that past me thought future me should pay attention to, so that when I open to a totally blank daily spread, I'm not just overwhelmed by the blank page, I actually have a place to start. This is my Hobonichi cousin, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I'm in the Hobonichi cousin. I have a whole video on how I set this up on my channel. So I think you can see how this system works amazing for very busy people who have trouble remembering every little thing that they need to do. I am super, super busy. I have a very demanding 9-to-5, and I also work on this YouTube channel on the side. So this is a system that has been really helping me not forget things between those two projects, and then also just like having a life in general. I will say it's been especially helpful for work because I have a lot of tiny little moving pieces that need to get done on certain days or need to be handled in certain ways, or I need to follow up with someone to get this other thing handled by this other week. So if you have a life like that, I think this will really help for you too.
I want to hop in here and thank today's sponsor, SaneBox. We've all been there. You open your email inbox and immediately feel that familiar dread as you sift through piles of promotional emails, newsletters, and random notifications before you finally find the one message you actually need to respond to. Sure, you could manually delete them one by one, but why do that when SaneBox can do the heavy lifting for you and save you hours every single week? SaneBox can be used with any email client and works like an AI-powered email assistant. It automatically organizes your incoming mail into appropriate folders and leaves only important emails at the top of your inbox. Less important stuff gets sorted into Sane later, newsletters go into Sane News, and emails from annoying senders can be banished forever to the Sane black hole. The best part? It learns your patterns over time, so it gets smarter about what actually matters to you versus what is just digital noise. An average SaneBox user saves more than 4 hours a week. That's basically half of a workday back in your life, every week.
Check them out at the link below using my code for $15 off a paid subscription.
Thank you again to SaneBox for sponsoring. Now let's get back to my drop and find system.
Let's talk about how to actually use your drop and find system. So first I'm going to talk about how I create the drops. And when I'm creating drops or writing things down in these bullets, I'm trying to make my drops as helpful as possible to future me, because present me is forgetful as heck. She literally cannot hold more than one thought in her mind. So that brings me to my first tip. I want you to capture things immediately. When your boss says something, when you remember that you need to follow up with somebody, when any reminder pops up in your brain or in your email inbox, immediately write it down. Don't wait, don't trust your memory, write it down. When I'm using my weekly drop and find system really thoroughly and frequently, what I will do is I will have this thought, say I need to follow up on all my emails for scheduling a shoot next week. I will say, okay, when do I need to follow up? I actually need to follow up in 2 weeks. So I will come to 2 weeks ahead and I will write follow up on email scheduling for next week, for example. If you don't have a specific idea of, like, say I need to follow up in exactly 2 weeks from today, or I need to follow up on Saturday because that's when XYZ happens. If you don't have an idea of this specific day you want to put your drops in, I recommend putting them in the sidebar over here. I do this all the time when I know I have a really strong project deadline and then everything else I want to handle or anything else I want to start necessarily has to happen after that project deadline. For example, my office runs the graduation ceremony for the school that I work at. So often in the spring, I'll have all these ideas of things I need to do, things I want to do. And instead of like picking a day that I want to do them, I know that they are not going to be able to get done until after graduation. So I'll just flip to the week after graduation and I will write those in the sidebar so that when I get to this week, I can see that I have dropped a bunch of projects here that I need to complete at some point. And then once I've dropped them here, I can schedule them out as needed throughout the rest of the month or semester. So capture immediately either on the specific day that you know you have to get something done or that you want to be reminded of a certain task, or alternatively on the sidebar or any like empty space that you have in your weekly layout so that when you get to that week, you can see it, identify it, and then schedule it from there. If you don't have your planner on you, you can also make sure you have some other capture method that you can funnel into your weekly later during your daily routine. I will leave my video linked up in the cards about my capture notebook, but I have experimented with many different capture systems on the go and when I'm at my desk, and I have lots of stuff about that on my channel. Tip number 2 is to write something that's as actionable as possible. Remember, we are trying to make your drops as helpful as possible to future you. So while present you might know what bring pamphlet to work means, future you is going to be like, what pamphlet? Why am I bringing it to work? That's why I like to write things that are as specific as possible so that future me knows exactly what she needs to do and exactly what past me had in mind for myself. So in that example I just mentioned, bring pamphlet to work, what I actually wanted to do was share Techo mask publication with my friend who's a graphic designer at work as an idea for future admissions publications. That's a very specific. I wanted to send the little like pamphlet that comes with the Hobonichi books, or came with the 2025 editions of the Hobonichi books, with my colleague who's a graphic designer because I thought the design was really interesting and it could be useful in some of the publications that we create in our office for the school that we work at. So I wanted to bring that, and this bullet really tells me precisely what I need to bring and precisely why I'm bringing it to work. I wrote this reminder like weeks before when I actually received this in the mail, and I looked for a day we were both on the schedule, and I wrote down this task very specifically so that future me would not be confused at all. Tip number 3 is to choose where to drop the reminder without overthinking. For drops that you want to be reminded of later this week or next week, for example, look at your schedule and just find a reasonable day. I'm usually comparing my schedule with a digital calendar that I use to keep track of all my appointments, since all my appointments at work are shared and they're really frequently changing. I'm usually looking at this and saying, okay, are me and then the graphic designer in the office on the same day on Thursday? Yes. Okay. Anything related to her I should put on that day. Or I'm looking at my schedule and saying like, oh my God, Friday is super full of meetings. I actually need to do this task on Thursday instead. And that's really easy when the drop or the reminder that you want to leave for yourself is something that is relevant in the next week or two. But things that are weeks or months away, just pick any day in that time frame. It doesn't really matter what day. Or, as I said earlier, you can use the blank space that often comes in most weekly planners to just drop stuff for that week and then plan it all out on Monday morning. I do this tip a lot when I'm not sure what day it is and like, I have something that's coming up like weeks or months in advance. I'm like, I know I need to do this in October and I know it probably should be done before the 31st. So I'm just going to handle it the week before and I'll drop it into the sidebar over here, just like I did here. And you can see I'm then planning things out, and I continue to plan things out throughout the rest of the weeks and stuff like that. This is another weekly layout I really love to use. This is a Hobonichi Weeks. It is the horizontal with memo. There's a couple planners on the market that have this style, and what this style is really helpful for is making a long brain dump list if you really like that blank weekly space as a drop zone versus if you like the individual days. You can drop generic things here and then drop dated reminders here. It works like a charm. The same is true for this layout. Drop general reminders here and then specific day reminders here. But if you don't have access to a bunch of blank space on your weekly calendar, you can also just pick a day, usually a day when you already have a routine to handle something, and just drop everything there. So for example, for me, I like to come in Monday mornings and take an exhaustive look at all of my tasks for the week and say, okay, when am I going to do this? Realistically, what lines up with my schedule? Blah, 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 blah. So if I'm looking at a weekly layout and say I don't have all this extra nice space over here where I can drop stuff to schedule, I will come in and just on Monday, I will drop in everything that I need to do. And then come Monday morning when I already have this routine, to come in and check off all my tasks or schedule all my tasks, I will come in here and then one by one I'll go through Monday and I will say, okay, actually I'm doing this on Tuesday, I'm doing this on Thursday, this doesn't actually need to be done until next week, and then I go into my next week thing and rewrite it on whatever day I chose for next week, etc., etc. So don't overthink it, just do what feels natural, but the most important part is that you have the space for dated reminders on specific days so that when those things come up, and I promise they will, that you need a daily space for, you actually have it. Tip number 4 is to use the weeklies as working documents. So just because you drop a reminder on a specific place and a specific day doesn't mean you're married to it. This is why I said keep it loose, keep it experimental, don't overthink your choices. When you come into a week and you see a bunch of things on Monday and you're like, I don't have time for this, or I don't want to do this day, you can always cross it off and reschedule. I like to put little arrows to indicate when I actually did the task or when I'm actually planning to do the task. And that rescheduling is totally fine. This will probably make your planner look a little messy, like this doesn't look super neat, but that's exactly how it should be. Working systems look used, and that's a feature, not a bug. Now, one thing I've alluded to here is that routines are going to be the backbone of this system. Routines are the backbone of any system, so I will literally always talk about the routine in these types of videos, but routines are really going to help you find the things that you drop and leave for yourself. Obviously, I come from an office work environment where I can have my planner open next to me all the time, but I think this is really scalable up and down. Even if you're on the go, you can get a much smaller planner where you are dropping and finding things in much smaller weeklies in a way that like this all just fits in your pocket. And then no matter where you are, if it's on the bus that you like to review your tasks, if it's at your desk, if it's at, you're at a job where you don't actually have a desk, maybe you're standing all day, you work in customer service, you can still whip this out of your pocket and see what needs to be done. But I do recommend having at least a weekly system so that those drops you made, those intentional drops you made for future you, actually get found. So what I do is I check my drop and find weekly every morning first thing. I have a good daily routine. If I've written anything here, I then flip to the appropriate daily page and I start writing it down. I'm like, okay, I have to take this photo. I got to write that down on my daily schedule. And then I operate off of my daily page for the rest of the day. Then throughout the day, if I have any leftover tasks, like things I didn't do or things that just aren't a priority right now that I know need to get done eventually, I will then flip back into my weekly, find the appropriate weekly day in the future, whenever that is, and write down the spare and leftover tasks that I need to get done. I will drop them for future me to pick them back up later. Then, as I already said, at the start of the week, I usually take some time to reassess what I have planned and to line it up into my schedule. A good example I had of that was where, Rachel, why don't you just use sticky notes? I ask myself this question all the time. Okay, here we go. So as I said, at the start of a week, I usually have some time on Monday to reassess what I have planned and lined up for the week. And then I can plug it into my schedule as I see fit, because sometimes I drop things into a week without all my meetings already being set, without all my doctor's appointments being booked in. And then I get to that week and I'm like, there's no way I can do all that on Monday. Like I have like 6 appointments on Monday. So I have to dole it out throughout the week or even the following week if I want to actually get all of it done. And that's okay too. Like I said, this is a living document. You want to use it, not keep it stagnant. The point is to just build in the routine of checking this, I would say every day, and then reevaluating when necessary so that you always have a reminder in here for everything that you need to get done. But if all you can manage is a weekly scheduling system, that is totally fine too. Find the routine that works for you so that all the things you're dropping, you are actually eventually finding. When you commit to a system like this, I promise you, you're gonna feel the stress reduction. Give it a month, watch how your mental load drops dramatically, and then let me know down in the comments if you've tried it and you liked it. I really find that when I'm outsourcing my memory to a trusted system, that constant, I'm forgetting something important anxiety just disappears, and I trust my system.
The drop and find system really comes down to this one core principle. Your brain is for having ideas, not for storing them. When you trust that anything you need to remember has a dedicated home in your weekly planner, you free up so much mental space for work that actually moves your life forward. Remember, this isn't about being perfect, it's about being consistent with that daily check-in routine. Give yourself about a month to make it automatic. Don't worry if your pages look messy with arrows and crossouts. That's what functional productivity actually looks like. I'd love to know, what's the most recent example of you completely forgetting a task and what were the consequences? Let me know down in the comments below. I hope the system will help you not have that happen again. If you liked this, check out my top 5 tips for functional planning. I will leave that right here next to my head for your viewing pleasure. Thank you so much for watching, for being subscribed, for being awesome. I love you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.